Welcome to Week 11, Data Transmission Security. My name is Charles W. Bill Marshall. That's my email address, and if you need an appointment, email me and we'll find a time that works. Okay, so this is for CIT253. It's a 3-credit hour course. Data-driven web pages is the name of the course. And as always, Blackboard is where you can pick up assignments and turn in assignments. I do have supplemental information on cwmclass.com. So everything we've been doing is HyperText transfer protocol. It's plain old HTTP. It's not secured because it transports everything in plain text. That means that anyone who intercepts the traffic can read it. So a hacker who's monitoring the coffee shop's Wi-Fi, your internet service provider, anyone else on the route between you and the web server. It's a lot like having the old party lines if you came from the country. In 1994, Netscape decided they needed to enhance it, and they wanted to add some encryption. So they married a new encryption protocol called Secure Socket Layer, or SSL, to the original HTTP. And they called it HTTP over SSL, or HTTP Secure, or HTTPS. So it does much for the privacy as for security. It keeps hackers from reading your data, so somebody can't sit in a coffee shop and watch you key in your password or your credit card numbers. It keeps somebody from injecting their own code into your web session. Using HTTPS allows encryption of your traffic even though you're not sending sensitive information. So when in doubt, encrypt. Your behavior online should remain as private as possible. So how does it work? Well, in HTTP, you can see everything going back and forth in plain text. But if you do the same connection over HTTPS, it's encrypted and it becomes garbage if you don't have the key. So SSL was the standard protocol used for HTTPS. They came up with a newer version called Transport Layer Secure TLS. They're essentially the same thing, a little bit different technology, but typically it's called SSL/TLS since both monikers are used interchangeably. We'll discuss the newer TLS. You need 3 things to encrypt data. You need the data you want to encrypt. You have to have a unique encryption key. It's just a long string of random text. And an encryption algorithm, the math function that garbles the data. So if you have symmetric encryption, you use the same encryption key on both ends. So, for example, when I was at Parker Tobacco Company, we had a computer in Maysville and a computer in Lexington. We had an encryption key on both ends. We controlled both ends, and we could have very secure encryption. It becomes more complicated when you're on a website, though, because you don't control both ends. With symmetric encryption by itself won't work because, like I say, you don't control both ends. The problem was solved with asymmetrical encryption. Asymmetrical means that you use 2 different keys, one to encrypt and one to decrypt. We call that a public key cryptography because it's how we establish secure connections on a public internet. With asymmetric encryption, you're doing different but mathematically related keys. So I encrypt with the public key, and if you have the private key that goes with that public key, you can decrypt. Both public and private keys are computed together at the same time, and so the same mathematical process which lets somebody decrypt. This means that they're strongly related, mathematically speaking. Because of this relationship, they can be used to encrypt and decrypt the same data. This is also why public and private keys from different key pairs will not work together. Every web server has its own unique set, making your connection to the website unique from all other sites. So, public key encryption works. You have an asymmetrical encryption. First you establish, you pass over the public key that you're going to be using, and then symmetrical. Once you've passed across the session key with public-private key, he can decrypt the session key, and then you can go back to the symmetric encryption. Let's look at it in more detail. Your browser reaches out to the website server and requests a connection. It then sends its public key. It keeps the private key as a secret. The browser generates a third key called the session key. The session key is encrypted by your computer using the public key you got from the server. The encrypted session key is then shared with the server. The server decrypts the session key that it received from you using the secret private key. Now both ends have a session key that your computer generated, and they can do they don't have to use public-private encryption anymore. They can use symmetric encryption. Now that you have a session, the server only has symmetric encryption, and that's how it remains until you leave the website. So, your browser initiates a connection, sends over the public key. It says, oh, well, here's my public key back. With the public key and your private key, you can generate a session key. With the session key is encrypted using your public key and sent back across to the person with their private key. Then they can use that to get the decrypted session key, and now we're into straight asymmetric encryption like we want. So you only use the asymmetrical encryption briefly, trying to build up the third session key. And the point of switching to symmetric key, there are a couple of reasons. First, the public key encryption only goes one way. Your encrypted data going to the website is secure only because the web server knows the private key and it's their secret. But if the server tried to send encrypted data back to you with the same key pair, it would not be secure because everybody would have access to its public key. That means only one, that anyone could decrypt it. Second, the mathematical overhead of asymmetrical encryption is far higher and therefore requires much more computing power. It's not suitable for long sessions because of the processing power it would take off the server and the client. Public key encryption uses much longer keys, which makes it far more labor intensive. Check out the key example below. The symmetric encryption key can be used much shorter because no part of it was ever made public. Because when you have a public key, you already have part of the answer. Computing the rest of the answer, the private key, would be easy if the answer was short. Having exponentially larger keys is what makes it feasible to keep the private key private. So what does HTTPS not do? It doesn't hide the name of the website you're visiting. It doesn't protect you from visiting an evil website. The fact that somebody has an HTTPS site does not mean that they are approved or anything except the data between you and them is secure. They could be phishing you. It does not provide anonymity. The HTTPS does not hide your physical location or your personal identity. The server that is HTTPS can read everything that you send them because they can decrypt it. The site that you visit knows everything about you that it would know on a non-secure connection. It does not prevent you from getting viruses. It does not protect your computer from being hacked. And here's the website link. so that you can see even more details about that. So we've talked about SSL certifications. It's a type of digital certificate that provides authentication for a website and enables an encrypted connection. The certificates communicate to the client that the web server host demonstrated ownership of the domain to the certificate authority at the time the certificate was issued. Domain validated DV certificates. A website secured with a DV certificate offers only a locked padlock in the address bar. It does not show organization details because nobody knows what they are. These certificates validate domain ownership only, can be acquired anonymously, do not tie a domain to a person, place, or entity. So if you were offshore and trying to build a site to make people think that you were taking donations, you could use a DV certificate, and only thing you would know that somebody came to that site would know was that the site was valid, but they wouldn't know who owned it, whether you were a bad actor or not. For this reason, many websites using DV certificates are linked to fraudulent activity. There's organization validation, OV certificates. For OV certificates, in addition to the domain ownership, the organization is validated. The certificate details can be viewed on most web browsers, and giving online users the opportunity to determine if the site they're on is legitimate. EV certificates are preferred for most online users because they come with a most comprehensive verification, checking which includes the domain verification, as well as a cross-check to tie the entity to a specific physical location. This type of verification leaves detailed paper trail, providing customers with recourse should fraud take place while transacting on the website. The EV certificates are distinguished with a locked padlock, an organization name, and sometimes a country ID in the web address bar on most major browsers. How does a website obtain an SSL cert? For SSL certification to be valid, domains need to obtain it from a certificate authority, or a CA. A CA is an outside organization, a trusted third party that generates and gives out SSL certs. The CA can also digitally sign the certificate with their own private key, allowing client devices to verify that the CA is who it says it is. Most, but not all, CAs will charge a fee for issuing an SSL cert. What is a self-signed SSL cert? Anyone can create their own SSL cert by generating a public-private key pair and including all the information. But with a self-signed cert, there's no outside authority to verify that the origin server is who it claims to be. So I can go out and make a AT&T.com cert, but because there's nobody to verify that I'm really AT&T, it has low credibility. Browsers don't consider self-signed certs trustworthy and may mark the site as one not secure despite the HTTPS URL. They may also terminate the connection altogether, blocking the website from loading. It's possible to get free SSL certs. Cloudflare offers it, and that's, if you pull up the PowerPoint, that link will take you to them. HTTPS support Cloudflare is what's behind that link. So standard SSL certs are a single domain SSL certification. It is by default the baseline certificate type. It can be installed on one and only one server. It can secure both www and non-www versions of the website. So if you go to cwmclass.com or you go to www.cwmclass.com. Both will give you will be verified by an SSL cert. A standard SSL cert are available at 3 different validation levels. Domain validation simply requires the server authentication. Organization validation involves a light business vetting and places the verified organization information on the certificate details. And extended validation requires a deep business vetting and also takes place the verified organization name prominently on the address bar. And here's some of the most popular people who provide them. And look at how, as you go up in the type of certification, it takes longer. Now, the other type of cert is a Wildcard SSL cert. They're a special type of SSL certification. In addition to securing a single domain, it can also secure an unlimited number of first-level subdomains. So, if you had a Wildcard cert, you could use one cert on mail.website.com and members.website.com and development.website.com and logging.website.com and anything else that you want to put in front of website.com. Wildcards allow websites to encrypt all their subdomains with a single certificate. It saves time and money of buying repeatedly as you add new servers. And best of all, if you add a subdomain, you don't even have to reissue the certificate. Just reconfigure your server and your Wildcard will secure the new subdomain. And this is what we're talking about here, is when you have one server that's running several websites off the same server. There are a couple of drawbacks to wildcards, though. First and foremost, from a security standpoint, they're potentially inviting greater risk because the same private key will be associated with all your subdomains. So if somebody gets into one, they're into everything. If your private key gets compromised, you won't be able to limit the damage. That's what we were just talking about. And wildcards are not available for extended validation level. This is only for security reasons. So if you want extended validation level, which you probably do if you're taking money over the internet, you can't use wildcards. All right, and here's the top providers for wildcards. But if you Google for Wildcard SSL certs, there'll be many people hold their hand up and be glad to take your money, and you can do some research and decide where you want. So why use Wildcard? The biggest reason I have, besides it's easier for the administrator, is once you have an organization that starts getting lots of different web servers, mail.something and info.something and sales.something and so forth, at some point you're going to start having people sign in, and I can tell you that your users really get upset when they have to sign in 4 and 5 times as they move between your different servers. And you probably need different servers because you're working off different databases, or they have different features or whatever. If you have a wildcard cert, you can set up a session and move it across all the different servers that are all running on that same wildcard cert. But you're gonna need sessions, and you need the wildcard SSL cert. So what's best? It depends on what you need. If you have large digital infrastructure and just want to get everything encrypted, a domain validation wildcard may be your best bet. If you're an enterprise attempting to secure subdomains on an internal website, an organization validation web wildcard is a good fit. And if you're a small website or you want to put the extended validation name badge on your subdomains, you'll need to go with a standard SSL cert. And there's a web link to tell you even more. So how to install an SSL on Apache? There are 2 places that tell you how to install it on Windows. I actually use the one there at the bottom of the page. But when you buy a cert, that vendor will tell you how they think is best, and most of the major vendors have a very easily to follow way to do it. We're not going to install an SSL cert. Because we're working on localhost on Windows machines, we're not doing DNS. And I decided it wasn't worth the risk to take a chance of breaking your all's Windows machines, putting them on when they really don't do anything, basically because we're never going on the internet as you test. The other side, quite frankly, is most of you who are going to actually run websites to a large extent will be using cloud services, either services that have virtual machines that you're running on, or some subset of a server where you can't even get to the OS level. In either case, you're going to have people who spend their life doing this kind of stuff, and you will say something along of the sign. You'll put a ticket in, they'll say, I want to install an SSL on this, and they'll tell you that'll be $50 or whatever, and in 24 hours it will be done. So it's good for you to understand the concepts. I really don't see the payback for taking the risk of breaking your Apache server trying to do it. But if you had, and I actually went part of the way through the process, you would follow the link, get instructions. Then you have to decide which different type of SSL cert generator you're going to use, because in any case we would have been using a self-certified, which is quite frankly damn near pointless because nobody, it doesn't build any credibility with your users that are approaching. But you would have come down through here, and I in fact picked the Win64, picked the exec and downloaded it, and when I ran it, well, I also had instructions, but when I ran it, it came up and looked like this, and I filled in my names and it generated a cert. This was the command that I actually ran up here. The name of the cert was actually CIT253.CRT. Alright, assuming we put in HTTPS, we have to deal with the people who don't remember to type it in the front. And I would advocate that any website you have ought to be redirected so that any thing that comes in HTTP is redirected to the port for HTTPS. And when you do that, an SSL cert is installed on the server and the website is not available. Alright, when an SSL cert is installed on the server, the website is not available via secure HTTPS connection by default. It's necessary to add HTTPS to the URL every time, and your users won't remember to do that. And the best way to achieve maximum security for website visitors is to enable automatic redirection from HTTP to HTTPS. The detailed instructions are here or there, 2 links you can copy from PowerPoint. Because we didn't install our certs in Apache, we really can't do this phase, but again, this is something that I would give you dollars to donuts. If you deploy a website, you'll be deploying it off of a cloud server, and the support people will know how to do this. And if not, you can Google it and find out if you're running a local machine. But more important is to know that there is such an ability, and be sure that any site that you do uses it. So that's our CIT253 data-driven web pages discussion on data security, data transmission security. I hope you found it interesting. If you have questions, please send me an email at this address. And if you need to call me during office hours, that's the cell phone number. But it works best to set up an appointment. Thank you.